Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are wrapping up day 2 here at the Responsive Nonprofit Summit, hosted by Virtuous and We Are for Good. We are so grateful you guys are all here. We have a rock star panel, 2 of my favorite people in our space that are actually, doing the work for growing volunteerism to generosity, to givers, to helping our communities. They're 2 of my close friends. I'm Eric Tamales. I'm a recovering fundraiser from Pittsburgh. I spend a lot of time on the front lines, and I just get to hear a lot of great stories of what's going on out there in our field and inform our platform and our technology. And I'd love to introduce you to my 2 new friends here, Paige and Megs. We're going to talk through how we're going to be able to grow volunteerism in our donor base. But Megs, I'm going to let you go first. Introduce yourself, please.
Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. My name is Megs Yunn. I'm the founder and executive director of Beverly's PGH. As of 7 days ago, it was legally named Beverly's Birthdays, but I'll get into that. But we are a 12-year nonprofit that celebrates and strengthens families in Southwestern PA. So in February of 2012, founded the organization with a very simple premise of providing birthdays for children experiencing homelessness and families in need, for those in our community that weren't having the opportunity to be celebrated. Our organization has grown quite dramatically over the last 12 years, hence the new name, Beverly's PGH. And we have 3 divisions that really come alongside about 40,000 children and families throughout our region each year. That's our birthday division, our basic care division, and our babies division. But really at the end of the day, what we do is we use the vehicle of celebration to create positive social emotional experiences for families, to be a resource connector, as well as to provide basic material goods. And we wrap that all together with a little bit of sunshine and glitter. And we can't do what we do without volunteers. They are true donors to our organization, time, talent, and treasure. Collectively, we have to raise $2.8 million from a budget perspective, but I could not do that without their heart and manpower. So I'm excited today to talk about volunteerism converted to donors.
Megs, you're so right on. I love that. I had the opportunity to get a tour of your facility with my wife over the holiday earlier this year. And she is so right. She does have the cheer. She has the cheer wagon, if I remember correctly.
Yes, cheerleaders, Land of Cheer, my boutiques.
So good, so good. But yeah, we're great. We're great. Love your organization. Love what you guys are doing in our community. Paige, I love what you do too. I was in Dallas for so long. So
yeah. Well, I'm so glad to be here. My name is Paige. I am the founder of the Birthday Party Project. And funny enough, Megs and I began our missions in the very same month of the very same year we kicked off. And so our mission is pretty simple. We bring joy to children experiencing homelessness through the magic of a birthday celebration. And we do that in a few different ways. We actually very much rely on our volunteers. We call them birthday enthusiasts, to help us celebrate children who are living in transitional facilities, homeless shelters, and in the foster care community. And we do that through 2 different programs. We have our in-person parties, our monthly celebrations, and then we also have a birthday in a bag program. And like Megs has said, is that nothing happens around here without the power of people. And we believe in the power of people, and we believe in the power of a celebration. And it's been really fun for us to see how people have been able to give of their talents to the organization in very different ways that has allowed us to thrive over the last 12 years.
That's awesome, Paige. Oh, it's incredible. So incredible. Team, friends, everyone out in the interwebs out there, we're going to do something a little bit differently in this workshop stage where we want to engage you. So please, in the chat, tell us where you're from, what organization, are you managing volunteers? What role do you have? And what questions do you have for these 2 subject matter experts? I come from the Boy Scouts and healthcare system. So I come from the volunteers, and we are a volunteer-led organization with the Boy Scouts, as well as the hospital with our auxiliary and everything else. So I understand as well coming from that space. But, I want to kind of start over with you, Megs, if we can start this conversation. Sure. You told me a story about Miss Lynn, and I'm sure you want to share a little bit about that journey with her.
Yeah, when Eric and I were talking, we were just talking about how, volunteers can organically become donors over time, or the other way around. A donor can be converted into a volunteer. But I think it's really about being really, truly respectful of what that individual is contributing to your organization, because it takes a community. I always say that those who are supporting our work are our cheerleaders. They are true champions of cheer, and we affectionately refer to the work that we do at our facility, the land of cheer. So my work prior to being engaged with starting the organization was I was the director of volunteer service at Washington and Jefferson College, which was is a local university south of Pittsburgh. And it is all about really igniting people's passion. I always say that when I was talking to my college students, I would be like, volunteerism should not be a chore. Like, it truly should be an extension of your heart and what you're interested in and what excites you. And so when we look for volunteers here with Bevs, we're looking for people that are really excited to be here. And I was telling Eric about Miss Lenny. She has been volunteering with us pretty much 2 days a week for the last 2 years. And we would not exist without her time and heart and passion for our organization. And we were laughing because Lynn basically helped make the back end of our golf outing work last week. We hosted it at a Top Golf. And she put together all the packages and like the donor gifts, and she was like instrumental. And here it was super exciting because she won with the worst golf score. And so personally got to then receive her own packages that she like single-handedly put together. Awesome. But Lynn is a part of our community. And that's what Beverly's wholeheartedly is always about, is creating communities. This community of our donors, our community of our volunteers, our community of our families and our agency partners, because you want to feel like you are bigger than yourself, like you're a part of something. My mantra in life since I was in college has been a life without cause is a life without effect. And I want to wake up every day and feel like what I'm putting out into the world is contributing to something. And that's how I think we have to treat our volunteers, is that they are a part of something. There is not the top donor and then the volunteer. It is everyone who is contributing to our mission. And so I don't think any is less than. We're currently recruiting for a role at our organization. It is the donor engagement manager. That donor is also managing all of our volunteer initiatives because they are one to us. And so really creating that respect. So that was my Miss Lenny.
Oh, I love that.
I think you hit on something that I think is really important when you talk about welcoming people into a community. So we represent, we host birthday parties in 15 cities around the country. And it can feel sometimes, if we are based in Dallas, our headquarters are in Dallas, but we have people all over the country that are volunteering on our behalf, hosting parties on our behalf. And one of the ways that we talk about our community is we call them partners, right? So we don't say the word volunteer. It's part of our language bank. We actually don't use that word internally whatsoever. They become a birthday enthusiast. You can become a party coordinator. Those are ambassadors of our mission, hosting our parties on our behalf. You can become a community partner. But no matter what, there is a level of honor and acknowledgement into those services that I think actually invites people in further into the conversation. And to Meg's point, when people become a part of something, that's when they feel that next level, that next kind of tug to become more involved. Yeah. And so I feel like I see often that people, look at volunteers by numbers, and we have thousands a month that we interact with, right? And so does Megs, I'm sure. But when you look at volunteers and you call them by a number, or you think of them as a transaction, I think that's where we miss the mark. This becomes something so much more than a transaction. If your goal is to, get something out of them, certainly understand, but think about the ways that you can pour into them and what that looks like. And now that transforms their experience to then deepen their roots into our organizations.
And I really think, oh, go ahead, Eric.
No, you guys are just hitting, you guys are on fire. And I'm thinking through, like yesterday, I did the keynote for our maturity model. We're talking about doing a 360-degree view of our donors, our customers, our volunteers, our constituents, whatever you want to do. And you want to be able to know who our people are, but you want to know everything, right? Like the volunteer is going to become a donor. They're going to become, I mean, frankly, you guys are probably seeing this, is that there's, this generosity decline, giving is down and giving in all throughout the areas. But the way we can be able to combat that is by, embracing our volunteers to help do the work for us, right? Like, and get out there and talk about us and do the testimonials, do the ties, as well as the time, talent, and treasure.
Well, that's just right. And what I love so much is like, we believe in equipping them. So we call ourselves the support team. So here at headquarters, we are the support team to our community of birthday enthusiasts and party coordinators. So our role is simply to equip them, to give them everything that they need to go out and be successful, to host parties on our behalf. They need the language, they need the party supplies. I mean, we're talking about all of the nuances that exist in our organizations. If we can provide that to them in a really efficient way that makes it so easy and simple for them to receive everything, they feel they get a profile of understanding what they're doing and why it matters. They even get involved in our language, like here are words we use and here are words we don't use, right? And then what I love so much is that actually we use VOMO, and VOMO makes it super simple to automate our communication back. So for us, it's not a one and done. And well, thanks for coming to our party. We really appreciate your, we're keeping in touch with them all the way through. And one of the things that I think is so easy in nonprofit world is that we all have a million things going on, and we're all wearing a lot of hats. Megs wears 17 hats. I wear 14 hats. Okay. So hats, and our teams have lots of hats. And so if we can systematize this process, right? If we are automating everything, those touch points become something that becomes part of your culture, and that culture continues to, we just are able to deepen those relationships because we are able to stay in touch with them in a different way versus this transactional kind of one and done, hope you'll sign up again and see you later, high fives, right?
Yeah, and I would echo all of that. I mean, I think I keep coming back to the concept of community, and that there's a lot of ways to immerse people within your brand in a way that is authentic and true. And so one of the things that I've loved so much about the organization that we've been able to create is I've had 4 children in the last 12 years personally. And so this is a family organization, and we've really looked to create spaces and places for the entire family to be engaged with our organization. Because what I want to teach as a mother to my kids is the value of having a servant heart. And, when my oldest was young, he would say, mommy's job is to make people happy. Well, I want to be able to give that gift to other families who want to teach their kids about service. And so, several years ago, we started a program pre-pandemic. Pandemic made it hard to continue it, but it was our service learning Champions of Cheer program. And so we actually created a leadership development program for individuals from kindergarten through 8th grade that would spend some time at the land of cheer and then create a service project to benefit our organization, but to really teach them leadership building skills. And we had a big lunch and celebration with trophies. But those families and those little ones have been committed to our organization that I have now literally wrote letters of recommendation for kids who are going into college applications, because we created a space for like the family to be involved. And if you want to take off like that engagement hat and then put your donor recruiting hat on, I absolutely want those parents to be really excited about their kids' experience and then tell their company and then their employer wants to get engaged with our organization, that we created a really positive experience. And then we like to take it to the next level, because not all of our volunteers are actually out in the community, maybe sometimes seeing our services firsthand. So we try to immerse them in the work that we do here at our facility. So just last week, in honor of National Volunteer Appreciation Week, I was a little late, but we hosted a volunteer brunch for all of our kind of regular standing volunteers who are in the building a lot. But the coolest part it was catered by one of the moms that we had the privilege of giving a baby shower to. So she was here with her husband and her baby, and like that is now a client that has become one that we are now her customer and then servicing in the building. So it's such a full circle moment. So I really like to think of volunteerism as, don't just pigeon yourself into like who you think your volunteer can be. Your volunteer, if you can create space, you're creating a larger community. During the pandemic, we were really reached out to quite frequently from some of schools and young adult programs with individuals with special needs. Because you think about it, like they were sequestered, like so many of us, but their whole purpose of their programs is to get these young individuals and students out into the community. And how could they do that? So we were like, sure, we're open. Our facility never shut down during the pandemic. Through our order from our county contract, we were deemed open. Right. So we never shut down, and we have these volunteers in our building. Well, now that has turned into every Monday and Wednesday, we have an inclusive volunteer program here at our facility. And we have young adults and students with disabilities and special abilities all throughout our building each day. And like, how cool is that? That now these are individuals who we're learning from and their special skills. And so I think volunteerism should be thought about broader than just what is someone able to do for me? How can we create that space in a community?
And I love what you're doing there, though, is like you're building, we talk about this all the time. It's like, how do we acquire new donors? How are we beginning new volunteers? And like, you're going at it from like a ground swell of just like building the family experience. And if you're intelligent in the fact that you see what's going on in the space with generations, right? Like older generations want to give to organizations, younger generations are giving to causes, and they're giving to larger, and there's more philanthropic opportunities at the younger generation. So you're building a base as well as their family circle around it to be able to grow your organization. I think love that.
Yeah. And like, we're so excited because we're new Vomo and Virtuous customers as an organization. And we know that there is so much more on the horizon for us as we dive deeper into the technology to be able to really streamline. And like Paige was saying, do more automation. We just came on board. Our database went live last week. And so we're really excited because we know that we'd like to believe we've been doing a lot and made a lot of efforts and strives, but we know that there's so much more you can do. And the more we can personalize, that's what it's about, is people don't want to be like, dear volunteer. Right. They want to be like, dear Paige, like you personally did this. And, you know, the more we can do that from a capacity and using technology to help automate some things for us, it's only going to strengthen the relationships that we have with our donors and volunteers.
Love that. Love that. We put up a small poll just briefly back earlier, which was, let's start with the foundational data. What proportion of your data and your volunteer, or what portion of your volunteers are active donors? What do you think of this, Paige? I mean, I have no idea was over 50% of our field here.
I think that's the thing that I would like to spend just a moment on is I think knowledge is power. And in order to understand in my opinion, in order to even understand like what your capabilities are, I really would encourage you to take a step back and try to like reconcile this data and understand who's involved with your mission. That's a surprising number to me. And yet so many nonprofits are under-resourced, right? Like we are all doing the best that we can every day to do the work. Automating some of this will be a critical component of your nonprofit work, of your mission work, because we need to be able to see and understand a person's journey with our organizations and with our missions. And so for me, I think it's really important to take a step back and get as clear as possible. And if it's as simple as exporting a couple of lists and putting them together, merge them together and see what you find out, it would be time well spent. I would say that we are in that 75 to 99% category. This is something we've been tracking for 12 years. We put milestones in place so that we are able to connect with people based on the way that they interact with our organization. For instance, if you give us 4 volunteer hours, we send you a high five. 8 volunteer hours, 10 volunteer hours, I think it is, we'll give you, you get a sticker in the mail. At 20 volunteer hours, we're sending you a shirt. The same is true on the development side. At certain levels of giving, we acknowledge it in different ways. And sometimes those things combine, right? But we worked really hard to get our pulse on this because we really do believe that we want to look at somebody as a whole person and not just looking at them based on, one transaction or another.
I love that, Paige. I love that, Paige. I'm going to continue the conversation. And I saw a question in the chat I want to go back to is, what is the best way to identify volunteers that have the most potential to converting to donors? What do you guys think?
Actually, this is, sorry to jump in, Megs.
Go for it. Mm-hmm.
I think we're going about this. I think we could do this differently. Here's how we do that in our organization is we actually start by asking the person, like, what brought you to the birthday party project?
Yeah.
And what gets you excited when you're here? What do you hope to get out of this experience and this relationship? Most of the time, those answers will guide you to a very specific point, right? Maybe it's a first timer at a party and I'll say, hey, what brought you here? How did you hear about us? Well, I really want my kids to be involved. I really want them to see volunteerism. Awesome. We have other opportunities for them to get involved. Here's some other ways. And then I think once they do that, you can connect with them again and say, how was that? Do you want to maybe get your school group involved, your youth group involved? And you keep taking them on this journey to see what's possible. And if you go alongside them and you step alongside them in these conversations, they'll eventually get into a place of understanding what their capacity looks like. And most of the time, their capacity does look like, bringing a gift to a party, donating money, like getting their corporate group to come in and fill favor bags. I mean, it looks like a lot of different things. But I think that we have to take them on this journey and start by just asking like small questions, that those small steps are really what leads to big impact.
Paige, you didn't do this. You're not a plant. Sorry, Megs. I'm going to say one thing. You didn't do this intentionally, and you were not a plant, but you literally just walked us through the responsive fundraising mindset, which was listening to who our donors and our constituents are, suggesting that next step, connecting with them, and then learning from it. And it's just like that mindset right there is like so ingrained. You can do it for everything out there. It's like, so thank you. She's not a plant. We didn't talk about this beforehand.
We really didn't talk about it, honestly.
Great, but it was the right answer. So awesome. Megs, I'm going to
I was gonna look at this question in twofold to kind of like piggyback off of what Paige said, is that, don't feel overwhelmed when you leave here thinking like, wow, I'm not doing enough to be personal with my volunteers. I think there's always opportunities to grow and strive to do more. And capacity really is a challenge for so many nonprofits. But if you can start to make those small changes, like, for example, and I'm sure Paige can echo this, we're an organization centered around birthdays. So every single one of our volunteers and donors is getting a birthday card from us, just hands down. It's about relationship building. If you can think about ways to have personal touches with your volunteers, even if you don't have the capacity to get to know each and every single one of them, that's a step in that right direction. I think about one of our volunteers who's very often in this building. She is not only one of our most frequent volunteers, but she is a donor who is the most frequent donor. It doesn't necessarily mean she is the most frequently giving in a dollar amount, but she frequently gives because we frequently create opportunities for her to be connected to the organization. And then to answer the question specifically, I think it's depending on which segment of volunteerism you're looking. I'm definitely a little more transactional when it comes to corporate volunteer engagement, because of the fact that I'm looking at companies as if they have a corporate volunteer program, if they do corporate donor matching. I'm definitely looking at that a little more like, okay, how can I amplify this relationship? Like, who can my individual be to help me get in front of this from a larger sponsorship opportunity? But I will say that's a slow going relationship. It doesn't necessarily always happen overnight. Corporations take time because they also have staff turnover. And so you might be working with one contact. So I always say, like, try to find at least 2 people on the inside, because if that one person leaves and that was your in, you want to make sure you have another in. So I would say if you're looking to try to generate ROI quickly from a financial perspective, looking at what companies in your community are really committed to service and like do volunteer days of giving, have a corporate match program, because that will actually translate into dollars probably faster than maybe an individual relationship will.
And I think too, I mean, the reason why we built this panel out together is because, I mean, Paige, you're a nationally based organization, and Megs, you're a locally based organization, and you have volunteers in different capacities. And I think that's a really great point, Megs, about like going deep and wide within your own corporate community or community and volunteers. I'm a big believer in, like, I've always ever heard is like the 3 T's. It was like time, talent, and treasure. That's what we need to be focused on. You know, I'm not going to I give my time and my talent. I don't want to give any treasure, but I think there's 2 others that we never really talk about. I kind of alluded to it earlier, which was ties and testimonials. And Megs, you hit it. Was like, you want that influential network, and then you want those testimonials for them to tell people in your community why it's important to give to the birthday party project, volunteer, all that. So yeah. Anyway.
One thing on this, just when we were talking about corporate engagement, Megs, I don't know if you do this, but we do something called pay to play model. I mean, we call that's internal language, guys.
Right.
But we have a lot of corporate groups that want to be involved with what we do. And it takes an exorbitant amount of our resources and time to make sure that we put together a really great experience and activation for corporate groups. So for instance, at our headquarters, we have, 6,500 square feet of space that has gifts and party supplies and all sorts of things back there. If a company like Southwest Airlines likes to come in and they want to fill birthday in a bag for us, and in order to host 40 or 50 people at once, that takes our team a couple of, takes us a day to get ready, and then we are hosting them in our headquarters. And so we ask for a donation as part of that. In fact, that's what we do, is say we would love to partner with you in this way, and we ask that you commit to making a $2,500, $5,000, whatever the commitment is based on the workload. And that's kind of how we put our activations together. And because our time is valuable, and our resources are limited. And for us, that's kind of like, once we identify what they're interested in, then of course we want to meet them where they are, and there's flexibility in that. But if you're able to hold a line in some of this, it really does kind of set precedent of the experience. And we have very few people that walk away from our proposal at $2,500, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, based on whatever that interaction is.
Well, because I love that, because what you're doing is, like, when I was in our organization in Pittsburgh, the corporate community wants to have that philanthropic experience to garner their company and their employees together, and you're giving them an opportunity to do so, as well as you're getting the revenue from that to be able to support the organization. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, and I would say leverage that too, because we don't have necessarily a formalized concept in such a way, but it is a very active conversation that happens, because there is a lot of corporate groups, especially if they've gone hybrid or they're very much like, we want you to come to us. Well, for me to come to you, then you need to pay for those supplies and me to purchase them so that I can create that packing project. And that has gone over really well. But I will say, like, in the beginning, I wasn't as confident in my ability to say, well, actually, in order for us to do this, we're going to need a supply budget so that we can bring those supplies to you. And I've really been not actually met with a lot of no's. The no's were my own insecurities for me being like nervous to ask. And yeah, because volunteerism is time. It takes my entire staff days to make sure there's people in this building all the time. So I would echo Paige's yes.
Love that. There is a question in the chat, and I'm going to kick it over to you guys. Does anyone on this panel or in the chat do a direct appeal, either email, letter, or to their volunteers? I wanted to share a little thing that I did when I was in the space, which was, and it just came out about a week or two ago, which was breaking down. It goes into the independent sector, and it looks at the value of the dollar or value of the volunteer hour. And I think the average is now like $33.50 across the country. But you can look at your entire state. And what I always did was look at how many volunteers we have and the number of hours they put together. They volunteered for our organization. I would find out what that is, that number, that dollar value is per hour for my state. And I would send them an appeal. And I would ask them, hey, would you match this? You donated 10 hours of volunteer hours this past year, and now it's $35. So now would you donate $350 to match the number of hours? Or I would do a decrease or whatever it would be. But it would be something to get folks engaged with, to get them in that idea of time, talent, treasure. But I mean, team, what do you guys do? Do you guys do any direct appeals to your folks?
Ours is a more intimate group from the committed volunteers. So they're really contacted with us all the time. We have an event every November that we call our Cheers to Yins event, and all of our volunteers who are pretty frequent to the organization are invited to that event. We have a pretty high turnout for that. But I'm excited because from a data tracking perspective, I know that with Vomo and Virtuous, I'll have the ability to kind of know my data better now so that I can be a little more intentional with that type of direct communication, an appeal or a letter. So, and I think also timing, like the way I would look at a lapsed donor, I now will have the ability to kind of look at a lapsed volunteer and just do a check-in, like, where you been? Because sometimes like life gets in the way of a volunteer, and we want to check in on them too, because they were, a pretty consistent face, and then maybe had a personal life crisis, and we want them to feel like, hey, we're here for you. You were here for us, but you're a part of our community.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Technology, I think, is on your side when we're talking about direct appeals. For us, especially, we interact with 80 different agency partners every month. So 15 cities, 80 different agency partners, thousands of volunteers. And so we have to break all of this down. So we'll put together a national, kind of just tactically speaking, we do a national newsletter, and then we break a segment down by markets. And then we're talking to people per market. And what we do is identify what the biggest needs are in that market at that moment. So sometimes, like right now, we just did a campaign to only our birthday enthusiasts, which are our volunteers, but we asked them if they would sponsor film. They've seen us take parties. At every party, we take pictures on Fuji Instack. They've seen what that does to a family and the impact that it can have on a family. And so we just simply say, you've been there, you've taken these photos, we need help. We're looking for film. Can you please donate film? And so we'll get really specific and dialed in with our community of birthday enthusiasts on those things. And then there are other times that, Eric, I think what you said is genius about matching. I think it's brilliant. And I think it's important because there are people that do want to give their time. And there are other people that are like, oh my gosh, you know what, my kid's going to volunteer, or my wife is volunteering, 10 hours this week, and I can totally write a check for those 10 hours as a sponsor. And I think that that's really important. But I do think that, like, the more that you can pay attention to your entire communication plan and how and when you're asking for these things, you can put in a great rhythm that makes people feel invested in what you're doing, but doesn't exhaust them. And that's the fine line that you have to work. You're working through an investment, but not an exhaustion.
I appreciate that. And it's like, I think about all the data and how everything needs to be connected. And that, like I talked earlier, that 360-degree view was like, and I heard a story from a food bank. I'm not going to say who it was, but they received a 6-figure gift from an organization, from a family. And the CEO wanted to make a phone call to say, thank you. And just say, hey, we appreciate everything is going on with your contribution. You're going to have so much impact. They got a hold of the spouse in the household, and she's like, well, did you know my husband's in your facility right now packing downstairs? And so, like, that's why the data matters, because you're taking a volunteer that is inside the building to be able to connect the two. But I mean, I think, what do you guys, how do you guys operate when it comes to that?
I would say that I'm really excited about what the next, decade of Beverly's looks like, because we know now more than ever how intentional we have to be with our data, because really honestly we have had such a boom since the pandemic in just the amount of funds we have to raise and the services and all of the ins and outs, that I'm looking forward to the opportunity to be more intentional and to be able to be more personal. So I always look at like every opportunity to engage in learning. I'm always like, things Paige is saying, I'm thinking like, okay, should I do that? That might be a good idea. Like, that, am I doing that? Like, always trying to challenge the status quo is how I operate as an individual. And so I think, to answer your question, I think that you could always be reevaluating what is working and what isn't working, because fundraising development is relationship building. And my team will tell you, I'm good in a room of 500. That's why I'm put me on the stage. That's my good. I am not as great one-on-one in sessions. I can be, but I need to know you better. I don't like the networking events as much. So I think it's about also knowing your team, like who really excels in certain areas, because you want them to be the front person for your brand and putting them in the right roles. I think so. Doing that internal audit is really important too, on how are you doing and who are they the right person doing it, and should we shift gears?
And I remember that conversation we had about like a month or so ago, where it was like, I mean, Megs, you want to grow and scale your organization. I was like, you got to get out of that spot to get someone else in. And shout out to you to get your first director of development to be able to do what you're saying and grow into your entire organization, because you have to have that foresight out there. So I'll give a shout out there.
As it relates to understanding your players and knowing who's in the building and all of those things, if anyone takes time during the week to kind of look through the information, it is really telling and it's really empowering, because what it allows you to do is say, okay, I look at a list of who's volunteered in the last month. And if these are people that are friends of mine, like I ping them, I'll send them a text and say like, how was the party? Did you have a good time? Like, give me some feedback. Where I didn't realize that you were there. Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. Did you bring your daughter? You know, and so I take time to look at that as part of my like monthly rhythm. I'll pull that information. I also sit down with my development team to understand who's been giving in the last month, because I'm the founder. I am not in that role anymore of being so close to it, but I want to know the highlights, because we have historical knowledge. Megs and I have the historical information that can bridge the gap between things, right? And when you talk about this story, Eric, of, you know, being on the phone and saying thank you, but the guy is there, like it makes me cringe because
you're like so embarrassed.
so embarrassed. I mean,
but you own it and like move forward with it, and like that's where the data can be able to help drive that, right?
That's right. But I'm like, oh my gosh, we have to know these things. The other thing I think is really important is understanding our people also comes from asking them questions. So sending a survey out is really important. And I'm not talking about like, on a scale of 1 to 5, how was your experience? I'm not talking about that. I'm asking for feedback, and I want to know a story that you enjoyed. What would you do if you were a party coordinator? What did you see that could be we ask all types of questions different ways all the time, and we ask that of our donors. We call them partners, and we ask those of our birthday enthusiasts, because that knowledge is power, and it allows us to shift. And if we can stay nimble to their responses, it allows us to continue to kind of build on this foundation. But kind of back to what Megs is saying is like, time is finite. And so to be able to scale, the only way that you can scale is if you can build automations and database infrastructure that allows you to connect with people differently, because Megs only has 10 hours a day, and that's all. I mean, and she probably uses every single 10 hours a day to get work done, right? And so, but we have hundreds and thousands of people that we could be connecting with. And so building a system that allows you to scale, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and I think, and I would say also giving yourself the grace to know that it doesn't happen overnight. Like, it is an evolution, and that like, I think sometimes when we walk away from any type of seminar or sessions that we go to, we're also like, Oh my goodness. So I think of it as like, what are your small wins? Like, what are your small wins that you can say, all these little wins stacked up? Look what I'm doing to steward my volunteers. Look what I'm doing to steward my donors. I'll speak to a lot of maybe younger nonprofits or less resourced nonprofits, and they'll say, well, I don't have a donor stewardship plan. And I'm like, you actually probably do. Let me ask you some questions about what you're doing. And let's put that actually onto paper, because you probably have some really great things that you're doing, and you just now are like, oh wow, and there's that intimidation factor. Don't be. It takes time to cultivate. It's not a flip of a switch.
And to that point, though, is like, I put my major gift hat on. I heard this so many times from my database administrator, was like, if it's not in the system, it didn't exist, right? To both your points, what you're surveying, your questions, you have to put it in there, because we're going to scale our team, we're going to grow our team, but the donor and the volunteer is still going to be there, continuing our mission and continuing to support it. So love that you guys cover that. Again, the first point of responsive fundraising, which is listen. We have another question. We got 6 minutes left. I'd love to tee this up to you guys before we wrap up. But what are the tips moving the volunteer into a donor without making it feel transactional? You know, you want treat them like family, but like, we always don't want to ask them, but like, taking the transactional piece out of it. Like, how are you guys connecting with them, your volunteers, to become donors?
Well, I'm looking at diversifying revenue across a holistic approach, that because of the fact that giving is down across the board, a significant difference since 2022 across the landscape of philanthropy across the country, I'm always looking for ways to have like the brand itself be exciting, and that I'm asking sometimes without not having to directly always ask, that I want them to feel a part of something. So for example, like, I'm a huge Taylor Swift fan. I'm a Swiftie. I love it. I will own it. And we utilize opportunities like floor seats to Taylor Swift in Pittsburgh, and a raffle to have an opportunity to engage with donors in a fun way, where a lot of times those are our volunteers, like our volunteers who have kids or teenage daughters. They wanted to participate in a raffle, and that turned that one time maybe volunteer into a repeat volunteer, or that one-time donor into a repeat donor, because it was an easy ask without asking. So I'll say first and foremost, like, I am not a major gifts officer, and I am an accidental fundraiser, or I don't even know how to say that. So for me, I look at things through a lens of more of marketing. Like, my background's communication. I have an MBA. So I'm always looking at things from like storytelling and marketing, and less maybe about the trained like major gift officer model. So I'm looking at is how can we be fun and immersive, and how can I look at different channels for my volunteer to be engaged, that then I'm asking without always having to sit down and have a direct ask. And part of that is a capacity challenge, because I don't have enough time to do that. So I don't know if that answered the question, but I try to think outside the box.
No, I think I like what Megs is saying, and I certainly understand and have been in that position before. And so I totally get it. And you're right, giving different ways of asking that feels fun is great. One thing that I would say, and what I challenge for us personally at the Birthday Party Project, is we actually don't think of our volunteers as family. We think of our volunteers as partners in this mission. And so we look at people from a perspective of, we're partners in this. We are in this together in this community. And so I have to take the family side out, because if I'm thinking everybody is family, I'm bringing them all in and I'm cooking them dinner and I'm giving everything that I have to them. And what I actually need is people standing beside me and in front of me and behind me saying, we can do this together. And so we really talk about this, like, we are all partners in this mission of moving it forward. And so for us, when we get into how do you ask them for money, you say things like, you know, I noticed that you have attended, you know, you've been at like 10 parties this year. Like, that's incredible that you've given us so much. You know that we are always looking for gifts for our 15-year-olds. Would you consider doing that for us? Like, is that something that your family might do at the next party? Would you adopt and sponsor all of our birthday kids? I start really small. The other thing I do is say, like, hey, I know that there's some people that just get involved, and I say, I notice that you have access to resources that I don't have access to. Would you consider making an introduction for me? This is how I think that I could use that introduction as we move forward. So I try to remind them just through basic conversation that we're partners in the mission, and that's what we're doing to move forward.
I love this session, guys. This has been incredible. So enthusiastic. My brain is on fire. These two are rock stars. I mean, they're both founders. They have scaled their organization. They're growing. It's all about volunteerism nationally and locally. I'm thank you for both of your time, talent.
High fives, Meg. High fives.
I know.
All the way around.
Paige doesn't know how much I frequently will say, because they have heard of her organization. And I will always say, Paige is this incredible breath. Like, she went across the country, and I went like, I bleed black and gold. Like, I am in Pittsburgh. And so it's super cool to see the same kind of mission concept, just execution is different. And I love it. So kudos to you. Yeah.
You too, friend. You too.
I'm so glad we were able to be here. Team, friends, all out in the interwebs, we are wrapping up day one. We're going to be going to the main stage here with my friend Steven. He's going to close us out for the afternoon. What I'm actually really excited for after that at 12 o'clock Pacific time is we're going to be doing it. John and Becky are interviewing Gabe to talk more about his book, Responsive Nonprofit. So please go to the backstage. I think that's the most intimate part of RNS, so we all can come together. Paige, Megs, thanks. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care.